Dane and Josh show. Dane sends his love. He's got to call a game tonight. I'm holding it down in the remote studio. Beyond excited. I don't even have any opening useful facts because tonight's one of those very, very special nights for me. We're approaching episode 200 tonight, and one of my long-standing heroes. I have a story to tell you. This is probably '05. I'm sitting there in my car one day, me and my buddies, and there's a station called Air One, and I hear the song come on the radio called Feel Good Drag. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is the best song I've heard in like the past 10 years. Who is this? Look it up, down a rabbit hole. Next thing I know, I'm knee deep in this band called Anberlin, which I'm telling you, you all know them. One of the best bands, in my opinion, in the past 25 years. That melodic, the singing, the guitar work. It's like taking U2 and Yellow Card and making it even better, making this just great conglomerate of just great lyrics. And I've been hooked ever since, guys. So I can't waste any time. I want to bring on one of the OGs, one of the founding fathers, and one of the best guitarists in the world. Just one of the greatest bands ever, Joseph Milligan. Joseph, how you doing, brother?
Oh wow, that's a great intro. I don't know if I can live up to that. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
All true, man. Like I said from day one, I can correlate your albums to seasons of my life. Like I go back to, like I said, Blueprints, and then I think about Dark is the Way when my daughter was born, and then even with Lowborn, and now of course with Convinced. Every season of my life, I have like a soundtrack of what you guys have done. So thanks for being the soundtrack for our lives, brother. you know.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. So I've got some questions. I know you're a busy guy. I'm glad you got a few days off on the road. I'll jump into it. So the first question, man, and again, apologies for the glare here in the remote studio. First question, when I go back to you as a guitarist, thinking about all the great songs you made, co-written, all of that, even the side stuff. When did you first get the itch to play? How old were you when you first picked up a guitar in your life?
Kind of a weird story. So during the summers when I was a kid, my parents both worked pretty much constantly. So I would always spend summers with my grandma and my grandpa. And my grandmother is a serial overfeeder. So like if you were, thin in any way, shape, or form, it was like, oh, you're gonna blow away with the wind. So she would just force feed all the kids. And so like there were a couple of summers where I got pretty tubby. And I was playing, baseball at the time and stuff like that, but I would go into the summer and I'd get, plump again. And like finally my mom was like, you're not going to sit around this summer and watch TV at your grandma's. You're going to learn to do something. And I was like, okay. And so she was like, you're going to learn to play an instrument. I was like, all right. She's like, it's either going to be piano or guitar. And so we had a guitar and we didn't have a piano. So that pretty much worked itself out. Um, so I was around 11 and I remember my sisters, both are older and they were big into like 80s hair metal kind of stuff and then like more pop stuff like Prince and Culture Club and things like that, The Cure. And so I remember we found my oldest sister Amber had taken guitar lessons when she was very young, and we found her old classical guitar, in a closet, and it had two strings on it, and it had been there for years. And so I dug it out of the closet, and we were just going to get it restrung, and in preparation for lessons and things like that. And I figured out the on one string, I figured out the melody to Van Halen Jump. Just ba 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 ba. And I was like, oh, I am so good. Like, let's go. Like, I got this. So yeah, I went into lessons at that point, and I definitely credit Bob Higginbotham at Carlton Music in Winter Haven, Florida. He made me work in the repair portion of the store, working on guitars for the first, I want to say, like 3.5, maybe 4 weeks of my lessons, and then we got into lessons after that. And I definitely value his approach with that, like learning to actually correct things and learning how to restring something before you even actually get into learning how to play it. That was really cool. So yeah, To answer your question, around 11 years old.
That's good. No, I'm telling you, man, I don't say this lightly. I've had hundreds of musicians on. Your story fascinates me so much because of how diverse you are as a player. Because you have heavy, you have the melodic, you have all of it. So it's cool to see your beginning. I always joke around. My dad, the first guitar he got me was Ibanez Roadstar. It's 5 string
Yeah,
bass,
yeah.
right? So when you got your first, after that, that one stringer, right? You didn't even know you were playing one string. What was your first
Right.
real guitar, man? Like your baby?
Oof.
If you can
Man.
remember.
No, no, I remember my first electric guitar. Um, like my parents didn't have a lot of money. I didn't, obviously, I was a kid. I didn't have any money. So, they couldn't afford to buy me an electric. So I got a job at Sonny's Barbecue and saved up a bunch of money and went to Carlton Music in Winter Haven, and they had this guitar that looked like a Gibson Les Paul. Um,
Nice.
but I think the brand was called Global,
Okay.
and
Okay.
I was like, that looks like a Les Paul. I'm gonna get it, and it's also like really cheap.
That's awesome,
So
man.
I bought that guitar. Honestly, in retrospect, I have no idea if it sounded good or not. Um, uh, and that was my first electric, and it served its purpose. I was like, I hadn't played anything except acoustic to that point, so to me I was like, oh man, this is so much easier. Like I can fly on this thing.
Yeah.
um that guitar didn't last terribly long. I don't think it was built to last very long. um and I did the typical like teen thing. I put stickers all over it and all kinds of stuff, and I
Yeah.
kind of ruined it, so yeah.
Or just made it your own, man. I get it. That's awesome, man. It's good to hear. I think about, man, and over the years of you playing, and again, icons of the industry, people like yourself, who I think about who spread a positive message, but are also true to yourself and rock stars. I remember the first time I seen you guys play, it was with Lost Prophets back in the day. It's been a while. And I think about the memorable events I've seen you guys play and like, wow, the impact. There's got to be one maybe gig or two or a couple if you're like, that's the, not that they're all not great, but is there a gig that you're like, that's been my favorite gig so far? If you could even do that, one or two.
um Yeah, I remember the first time we ever went to New Zealand. Um, it was a festival that was there, and I'd never been to New Zealand in my life. And I remember we just kind of weren't prepared for the scope. We had minor success in the US at that point. We'd had a little bit of success in Australia. It'd been really cool, and some things here and there overseas. And we went to this festival, and it was in a stadium, and there were just thousands of people, and there were cameras on us, and like we're on the kind of jumbotron things in the back, and we're just going nuts, man. And like it was, I think that was the first time where I was like fully blown away by an experience like that. Because up to that point, you have kind of little milestones where you're like, oh, this is my favorite venue in St. Pete, and I was so excited to play that one. And oh man, we're playing this cool venue in like Chicago or New York or something like that. That's awesome. And then you go a lifetime away from where you grew up, and see all of these people going crazy while you're playing, and that stuck with me quite a bit. And I know it did for the other guys too. Um, it was just that first little like, wow, this
Yeah,
is wow, yeah,
that's cool, man. And I read about that because you guys have done as successful as you are here. It's interesting how the rock scene is actually so much bigger worldwide than it's weird how because things take a few years to catch up. And so it's neat to
yeah.
see some of those international stories and just the places you played along the way and have yet to maybe still play on bucket lists and all that, man. So I know you spoke a little bit about your history of like who's taught you to play. Everyone has a different story, right? Like I think about my local guitar teacher who was actually like a local guy here. Is there a maybe
Yeah.
an influence on you or two also style of play? I know I've seen it and I know you probably hate this. I've seen people do the whole edge comparison, things like that of you. But going beyond that, I think you're so much more diverse than anybody I've watched. Who's a muse or two of yours, that you've looked up to as
Well,
an artist?
the problem is that U2 has claimed dotted eighth delay. Like
Yeah.
there's no dotted eighth delay that you can put on anything without people going, man, that sounds like U2.
Right.
I'm like, come on, man, I'm just trying to do something cool for the song, you know. But yeah, definitely U2. I love U2, but like I never set out going like, man, I want to make like the U2 sounding thing.
Right.
It
Right.
was just I liked the dotted eighth thing. So,
Yeah.
you know. But as far as like core influences, when I was, you know, first starting to play guitar, was right around the time that like CDs first started coming out. And my sisters were starting to like, you know, buy all these CDs and things like that. And so we had this, which by today's standards was a far too large stereo system with like record player, cassette deck, you know, 5 CD changer, and it was like, you know, as tall as a bookshelf. And I remember they had 3 CDs that stuck out to me, and it was the Metallica Black Album.
Okay.
It was Van Halen, and it was Van Halen with Sammy Hagar,
Yeah. Okay.
and
All right.
um,
Yeah.
and Nirvana Nevermind, which had just come out. You know, so I was still kind of influenced from like stuff that they were listening to when I was younger, which was like, you know, The Cure and Metallica and stuff like that, and kind of new wave kind of things, as well as like hair metal. And then, you know, I heard the Black Album for the first time, and it just blew my mind. You know, I was so into it from the start. I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. And then, you know, I would throw in the Van Halen thing, which I was at least semi more familiar with, you know, because 1984 was the first cassette that I ever owned. And
Wow.
I
Okay. Okay.
remember, I remember going to Kmart with my grandmother, and she was a very strict Southern Baptist. And, you know, the cover had, you know, a little cherubic kind of angel kind of sitting there with a cigarette in his hand, right?
Yeah.
And so and so all I did was put my thumb over the cigarette and showed it to my grandmother, and I was like, "Hey, I want to get this one," and she was like, "Okay," you know.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
so, uh, but then Nirvana Nevermind. I don't want to say that it was like one of these like life changing moments. I just thought it was cool, and so, but those records were kind of what got me into like wanting to play music and putting on pretend concerts in my living room, you
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah.
but like as far as me and like kind of my adolescence to adulthood, The Cure for sure, Metallica for sure, Nine Inch Nails was big. It took me a long time to realize that Alice in Chains had the biggest impact on me, musically, as far as like style and stuff like
Yeah.
that. At least to where I've gotten today. Um, it was one of those things that's kind of in the back of your mind, and you don't question why you're making these choices, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh man, that's why I did that."
Yeah.
But lately, as far as like the last probably 5 years, has been nothing but Springsteen.
Yeah.
I
Got
just
you.
listen to Springsteen constantly. So yeah,
Songwriter, man, and then I'm telling you, there's this blend, and I can see the Jerry Cantrell thing, man. I see that, but there's a blend of what you guys do where it's so diverse from like a Springsteen to like a Metallica to like a little bit of throwback, maybe Dirt album, to also mixing in with some 80s. I remember when you guys did True Faith on like the extra song. I see this blend. It's just such a blend, right?
I
And I
always
get it,
love
and that's
new wave. Yeah,
it's neat, but you take it, and I'm telling you, it's kids like what my kids love your stuff just like I do, and that's what's so cool about what you do when you cross generations. If I can listen to the same stuff that my kid does and they like you, you're doing something right. Like you're crossing generations, you know. Like I remember when I
glad I could
showed
do
her.
that for you. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Thank you. When I showed her, even when I go back to, because I play lost songs all the time, because actually one of my
Oh,
wife's
thank you.
wedding songs. Yeah, man, like the haunting is crazy as it sounds. That was one of our actual wedding songs to explain it, but just that this is stuff what you've done. So I love to hear where you get your influence from. When you think
I
about
appreciate
uh,
that. Thank you.
Yeah, man, all true. When you think about upcoming, obviously, I know you guys just dropped, Convinced, the EP and all that. Are you, and that's right off the press, like finally been itching for some new music. Are we looking at more
Yeah.
touring? Are we going to drop more singles? What's the next year looking like for you as an artist with the band or on the side project? What do you got going on,
Well, what's crazy is we did Silverline, and we pretty much went straight into recording Convinced. And we tracked a bunch of songs. A bunch of them did not make the record, but we wanted to just keep plugging away. And so we ended up with this core group that was really cool, but we were like, man, it's a little slow.
Gotcha.
We need at least one more kind of like heavy hitter. And we sat on that record for almost a year. Um, it was done. Like we were sitting on it for almost a year. And we were doing a show or a series of shows in Atlanta. And Nathan and I were down in the dressing room, and I had this demo that I had done, a little bit before. And Nate and I just sat there and we just messed with it and messed with it and messed with it. And we were like, man, this is really cool. What if we did this? Like this is the one that will make this whole thing kind of complete. And it ended up being Lacerate. And
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
so so we went back into the studio, we tracked that whole song, and when we put it with the other group, it was like, man, this is feeling like it's together now, or we're good. We're in a good spot with this. So that kind of completed that. But I mean, honestly, before we released Convinced, we've already got a group of songs
Yeah.
together. Like we're ready to go again. So
That's awesome.
we'll be going in, shortly, and start kind of laying down the bones for this stuff. Um, but it's been so much fun. It's been so freeing. We have such a great team together at this point. It's been easy because, kind of in the sprinkle days, in the tooth and
Yeah.
nail days, it was very easy. Like you kind of went in with a group of things. You had a great relationship with Sprinkle. We were able to like just like pump out these records and nail pretty much every point that we wanted throughout. I mean, I still go back and we listen to the demos that I did
Yeah.
on, like, whether it be GarageBand or whatever, and you put them up to the song that's on the record, and it sounds almost identical.
Yeah.
But then when we went in with Universal, it was a little different. They had a bit more to say about what we were doing, and also we didn't have a lot of time. We had just put out Cities, and 6 months later, they're like, hey, we need a record. I'm like, oh man,
Dang.
okay. Uh, so we went through those growing pains, and it was kind of a reality check, kind of your welcome to the NFL moment. And we got through that. And uh personally, to me, New Surrender, it's okay.
Yeah.
um you know and then we going into the next record was Neil, or not Neil Avron, it was Brendan O'Brien, who was like a personal hero to all of us.
Yeah.
And that was intimidating in a different way. And all of this was like we had gotten in such a comfort zone with Aaron Sprinkle and built such a relationship that you're going with these new people that like you've never worked with before, and you're not really sure what to expect, like what their dynamic is going to be with you, what they expect from you when you walk in. And it was a great learning experience. But now it's like we get to go in with our friends and we get to just have
Yeah.
fun, and it's been so awesome. And everybody, we have such a great like free environment of everyone throwing their ideas out, everyone being heard. um it's just so different than it was, and it's, I think, honestly lent itself to our like longevity at this point,
Yeah.
because we now have a blast together while making a record, whereas before we may have been here and there a bit stressed.
Doing it because you want to, not because you have to at this point. I love that, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You,
We still have more music to get out.
I love that, and I'm telling you, man, it's I say it, and I will say personally, I love New Surrender. Like I said, Breathe is it's one of those songs. That was, I
It
can
was
tell
a
you,
good record. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me
I,
wrong. It
I
was great. It's just
I
yeah.
think it's I think it's hard when from day one you have to challenge yourself because you have those bands and much love to Tooth and Nail and Aaron's awesome. We're buddies. We've had many of his artists on. Like you have those first couple records, but it's like okay, you guys didn't have that from day one, dude. Like you're starting off with
Yeah.
just bangers and like originals, so you're having to constantly challenge yourself to be as good or better, and you do it. Like it's not, it's there's no such thing as a bad Anberlin record. It's just not. So I love what you've
Wow.
done,
Thank you. I
man.
appreciate that.
But I mean, I'm just, and I'm not, man, I could go on for days. I'm going to transition for a second. I'm going to make you chuckle. There's a segment every episode, and every single time without
Okay.
fail, we bet on this. Now, usually if Dane wasn't calling games, he's commentating tonight, we would bet on this, but
Okay.
I'm going to bet. So imagine for a second that time doesn't exist, celebrities can be alive or that are past or back alive. And there's some questions that
Mhm.
our audience gives you. They're PG, but they're weird. We're going to get weird for a second. Okay.
Okay.
So
Let's go.
so imagine you're called up. These two '80s celebrity. Speaking of '80s, these two '80s
Mhm.
wrestling icons ask you to come with them to WrestleMania, and you, Joseph Milligan, have to just walk out on stage with an electric guitar and amp and just freestyle their intro song for one of these two icons. So your choices are the Macho Man Randy Savage or the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania. Who are you gonna play a song for as they come out?
Oh man, that's tough. Um, R.I.P. to both of them, by the way.
Yes, sir. Yeah, great
Both
guys.
had like crazy energy, right? So, um, I think it would be more fun to do Ultimate Warrior because it's way more manic.
I got you.
Like like Macho Man was a very but like Ultimate Warrior was just all over the
Just
place.
all go,
All you got to
yeah.
do is just tap the whole time, just tap constantly, and just gallop metal. Like that's all you need.
I love it. I had you for Ultimate Warrior. I did, man. Awesome. So
Yeah,
Dane sent me his picks. He had Macho Man, so I got you one up. So but that next one, you're going on tour in 2024. We're gonna say maybe something along the lines of Coachella, maybe Red Rocks is one of the shows you're gonna be headlining, and you get a new idea for a sponsorship, a guitar sponsorship for you. Totally out of the range of typical guitar sponsorships, but these two iconic companies approach you and say, "Hey, we'll sponsor you as long as you get our tattoo Post Malone style on your face." Okay, got to go this route.
Okay.
And the two companies are either A, Funyuns, or B, Pringles. You just got to tattoo it right there on the cheek, and they'll sponsor you. Which one are you going with?
Neither of them.
I got you.
I will
got you,
play
man.
the global guitar again if I have to. It will not be
I
a
love it.
potato chip company tattooed on my face. Yeah.
I had you for a little Pringle right there, man. A little mustache guy right there.
No, no way.
I love it, man. So you're going back for a second. There's a couple of '80s themes tonight, man. So you're going back to the
Okay.
'80s.
That's
Again,
good. I'm an '80s
everyone-
kid, so
Yeah. So the research that we do. So imagine you get a fill in, and again, iconic. Don't get me wrong. All of these artists, we love them, but you get a fill in for one of these two iconic songs. They say, "Hey, come on stage with us. You're transplanted as who you are back in the '80s." You can fill in and play "Bark at the Moon." You can fill in for Ozzy, and you're there for the night, or you can fill in and get to do the solo with Prince on "Purple Rain." "Bark at the Moon,"
oh,
"Purple Rain."
Purple Rain all day.
Got you. I got you. I'm
All
killing it.
day.
I'm 3 for 3, dude. Let's go. Well, technically 2 for 3 because you DQ'd the ship question. So,
Don't
two more,
get me
man.
wrong. I mean, Bark at the Moon was cool. Who was it? Jake. What was the guitar player's name?
I'd be lying,
Jake.
but I swear I thought it was Randy, but I'd be lying to you. I thought it was, but I might be
No,
wrong.
Randy had already passed on Bark at the Moon.
Gotcha.
Man, Jake. I forget his last name. Either way, go ahead,
Somebody look it up for us. I love it. When I put it out, somebody will tell
please.
us. So last two, man. As diverse and eclectic as your music has been, you guys are always constantly evolving and changing. So we'll say maybe for Convince Part 2, 2025 or something,
Mhm.
we'll just say this is a concept record, and you're gonna have one of these two legendary rappers come on and do a track with you and kind of, maybe mix it up a little bit. You can bring them in, they work with Steven and do an awesome guitar part. You can either bring in the legendary Ice Cube or the legendary Kendrick Lamar to do a track with you. Which one you going with? That's great.
Man, it would have to depend on the song because, I mean, Kendrick, man. Like Ice
But-
Cube is awesome. That would be cool,
Right.
old school, whatever. but I feel like Kendrick would be more fun.
Got you. Okay. I'm killing it, dude. And again, much love to both of them. They're both great. There's no bad answers. It's just
Yeah,
personality
yeah.
wise. So last one, man. A lot of artists and rockers get a chance to play movie roles and things like that. It's iconic cameos and stuff like that. So you're called up. They say, hey, we're gonna put two scripts on your desk, Joseph. There's an upcoming reboot of both of these two franchises. You get to pick one of these that you want to be. Okay. So
Okay.
your first choice is you can fill in and be in the reboot, and you're the new Iron Man. You get to be the new
Oof.
Iron Man. Or B, you get to fill in for the 2025 reboot and be the new Batman. Are you going Iron Man or Batman? Which one are you going?
All right. So I am not brooding or handsome enough to be Batman. I do feel like I could have strong goatee game, so I will go with Iron Man.
All right, man. I had you for Batman. I really did because I think you could pull off the Dark Knight very well.
Don't get me wrong, I would prefer Batman, but I just don't think I would do any kind of justice. So, no pun intended.
You could do like almost like a that's awesome, like a reboot where you're sitting there like brooding and thinking, playing guitar type of thing, like as I go out and fight
Yeah,
crime. So
I'm just not that dark, man. Yeah.
I love it. Well, man, thank you. Hopefully, interviews you've had, you haven't had a segment like that, rapid fire. So I appreciate you being
I
on.
definitely haven't, no. So, yeah,
Love it.
that's
So
great.
final segment, man. We do a little thing called open
Mm-hmm.
mic, and again, the premise of what we do, outside of being huge fans, every one of our athletes, ball players, artists that come on the show, we've always been about how did you get the courage to chase your dreams and just go out there and do it, right? We have athletes, musicians, other career paths as well. If you were to go back and maybe tell your beginning self, or maybe someone that wants to be like you, some advice or a mantra, what's some words of wisdom you'd give to someone else that wants to be you?
Um, well, first of all, it was never a question for me. Maybe that was irresponsible, but to me, like playing music for a living was never not a sure thing. Um, and
Gotcha.
I know I had teachers, parents, everybody telling you statistically, you have a less than X percent, chance of making this happen. But to me, it was like, no, you don't get it. It's going to happen. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And it did take a lot of work, a lot of work, a lot of really lean times, a lot of disappointment, a lot of being beaten down and then having to come back. But in the end of the day, I got to say that I got to do something that was exactly what I wanted to do as a kid. Um, so as far as like stuff that I've told people in the past, as far as like advice and things like that, it was just don't give up. I've had a lot of bands that I've produced in the past, even that you know the first sign of something not working out, they just kind of call it. And there's a lot of infighting. There's a lot of but that's going to happen. I mean, at this point, Stephen, Dion, and I have been together since 1996. Nate has been with us since I think 2000, and Christian's been with us since I think 2007. So like it's family at this point,
Yeah.
and you're inevitably going to have fights with family, like blow up, knock down, drag out fights. And it's fine. That stuff will be fine. You can work it out. It's not the end of the world. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep, plugging away and keep trying. Throw your demo tape. I'm dating
Yeah.
myself there.
No,
Um,
it's good.
keep putting your demo out to as many people as possible. Keep bugging your local promoter like nonstop until they put you opening for somebody. Just don't give up. That's it.
Yeah.
People give up too easy.
Yeah, it's neat, man. The correlation of what you say, and again, I'm so glad you didn't. You're well now, and then they'll look at the giant that you become. The same thing we tell our athletes all the time that most of the time, what you do off the field or off the stage is what matters, and the grind, the work ethic, the lonely nights when no one's watching you play for hours at a time, or rehearsal, or like you said, selling your tapes out of the back of cars. We had many musicians say those kind of things, right? And it's like the
Yeah.
grind is so heavy. We were just talking to LVO from Doubtry last week, and it's like, dude, half the time the grind, all of a sudden, boom, this grind, this work ethic pays off. And then next thing you know, it's like it builds off of that and builds off of that. So it's
Yeah.
just it's neat to see that you. I think there's something about guitarists, like you guys, the work ethic of what you have. Like you make it seem so easy, but you're one of the hardest workers in the room every single time. So
It's
I just
definitely not easy. I will say that. And it's not easy to stay engaged. Once you kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, like we're making it happen. We're on the road consistently. We're putting out records. Like people are responding. You still have to keep it going,
yeah
and it sounds super first world problems, but like it is taxing.
yeah
It is
yeah
mentally and emotionally taxing. But like, you know, I don't ever try to like put anything in the place of like this is harder than this thing or this is harder than this. It's all hard in its own right, you know.
it is work. It is
The
definitely
diff
yeah.
It's work, and you're sacrificing a lot of time. You're missing a lot of birthdays, a lot of anniversaries, a lot of time with friends and family and things like that, all kind of pursuing this thing. And at a certain point, it's going to culminate. It's going to get to a boiling point where you have to decide, like, you know, do I need to back up here for a minute and you know, let's all kind of take a breath here and spend some time at home and, have a normal life. And, ultimately that's what brought us to 2014,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
we were just going nonstop constantly. You got kids, you got wives, you got families, and then after a while again, you're like, man, I don't think we're done with this, so
Yes.
we'll see
Man,
what happens next. Who knows?
it's like sitting around the tea and just listening to like a seminar of just great things, man. I could listen to you for hours. I know you're a busy guy, but
I
I'm
don't have much left. Yeah.
man, I got you, man. I know that you've been making. Thank you for making music that has helped my life and then now my kids' lives. You're still a young buck, man, but to think how much you've done to influence us, I just can't say enough thank yous, man. I can't wait to see you on the road
I
again as you
appreciate it.
get
Thank you.
closer. Man, open invitation. I say this. I know you're busy, but again, everything you do, we'll keep rocking it. Maybe down the road when things slow down again, you're welcome to come back for another episode. Just know that.
Of course,
Um,
man.
but it's definitely bucket list, man. So I'll give you some time back during the night. We'll get to that as soon as we can. But thanks for making our
Yeah,
year
man.
and just keep rocking, okay? So,
Hit me up anytime, man. I appreciate it.
I will, brother. You be safe. Take care, and we'll be in touch, okay? Thank you, brother.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you
Love
later.
you too. So, guys, that's just. I'm telling you, man. I could go album by album and just talk about songs from each album that have influenced my life. I can't tell you how much of a starstruck moment that was for me. I've been listening to this band right along their POD and for me and Allison Chain, just the top of the deck for me, and they just keep getting better. Joseph, an original member, contributes. They write their own stuff, and most of the guitar work. Again, I love all of Dion's great. Of course, they're all great, but founding member just gets better every single time he makes a song. So thank you, Joseph, for doing that. I can't say enough thank yous. That was legendary, and I appreciate you blessing us with that opportunity to meet you. I'm sorry that we're mobile tonight, guys, but sometimes we have practice and things come up, but we wanted to get a chance to meet with him. We got some awesome ones coming up next week. I got our friend Morgan stopping by from Oregon. We've got our buddy Rex stopping by from an awesome metal band called White Cross. We've also got several more coming up in the future. Just going to be a great, great season of music and sports. But that was definitely a legendary bucket list item for me. So thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Amberlyn. Thank you, audience. Thank you, everyone, always for making this happen. Again, Dane sends his love. Don't forget, as always, that we love you. And as Dane would say, thank you for listening.